On the south side of the mighty St. Joseph River, just west of downtown Mishawaka, Indiana, was a thriving brewery that operated for a century. And it not only provided beer to thirsty folks across the region, but it was a key contributor to the growth and success of Mishawaka itself. Its name was a staple in the community for years. But by the 1950s, the brewery's glorious time had faded. Then, in the early 1970s, its historical structures were converted into an extremely popular residential and shopping center. But now in 2024, most of that shopping center's glorious time has also faded, leaving a very uncertain future for the once prominent and proud brewery and shopping buildings. Thank you for watching another Round the Bend Now and Then video. My name is Matt Emery, and I am a local history nerd. My main mission with the Round the Bend material is to create engaging content that shares how intertwined the Mishawaka and South Bend area's past is to our present. Before we dive into the content of the video, I want to remind you to check out episodes of our audio podcast that are available wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, and now even on the exact same channel that you're watching now, YouTube. In the podcast, you'll learn all about South Bend and Mishawaka's now and then as I interview local leaders, business owners, and community members because their stories help tell the story of South Bend and Mishawaka. There have been many businesses and industries that have helped shape the Mishawaka and South Bend area over the years. Studebaker, Ball Band, Oliver, and other crucial industries that helped to spark our growth. There aren't too many remnants left of these old industries, a few buildings here and a few buildings there. But there is one early Mishawaka industrial complex that's still standing, dating all the way back to the 1850s and whose post-industrial days might be the most unique of them all. In this video, I hope to tell the story of what we know as the 100 Center, utilizing dozens and dozens of historical pictures and South Bend Tribune articles, and also on-the-scene videos of the present-day area recorded and narrated by yours truly. For those of us, myself included, that didn't experience the birth and heyday of the 100 Center, I hope that this video adds to your collective knowledge of our local history and that you learn something new. For those of you who got to experience it, I truly hope that this video sparks precious memories of when you worked, ate, or shopped at the 100 Center. And it would be truly amazing if there are any of you out there watching who actually experienced the complex when it was Kamm's Brewery, and you actually drank Kamm's fine ale and beer. Then I definitely hope that this video sparks some memories for you. So thank you to everyone who has shared these photos and their stories online and on the various history Facebook pages. An extra special thank you to the History Museum and the South Bend Tribune for your treasure trove of old pictures and articles. In 1839, a German immigrant named John Wagner built a small wood-fire brew house. It would be located in current-day Buter Park near the river in Mishawaka. It was the very first recorded brewery in St. Joe County, but it closed after a few years. Then, in 1850, he opened up another brewery a little farther west, still on the South Mishawaka banks of the mighty St. Joseph River. In 1870, he sold his little brewery to a gentleman named Clemens Dick, and a few years later, Dick partnered with a young man named Adolph Kamm, and over the next decade, the duo grew the brewery and increased the quality and taste of the beer. A few years later, in 1873, Adolph Kamm married Josephine Schellinger, and you have to love the announcement in that 1873 paper. May wish they hadn't. Kamm's partner, Clemens Dick, didn't hang around too long because in 1879, he sold his remaining interests to Adolph Kamm, the land and the brewery and 45 acres in Clay Township, all for $12,000. Now that's about $380,000 today, so that's not chump change. If you recall, his wife Josephine's maiden name was Schellinger, and soon after buying out his previous partner, he formed a partnership with his new brother-in-law, Nicholas Schellinger. In 1887, they officially incorporated, and within a few years, the brewery's official name became the Kamm Schellinger Brewing Company. They had a capital of $65,000, which in today's dollars would be over $2 million. From there, it was nothing but growth, and over the next several decades, the brewery added multiple buildings and state-of-the-art equipment. They built a modern artificial ice plant, a powerhouse. They had cellars, vaults, and a bottling operation that was top-notch in the state. They were even challenging folks in the newspaper to come and inspect their modern brewery, a brewery that they said added substantially to the payroll of Mishawaka. They even had a beer that had health in every particle and happiness in every drop. I mean, how can you resist that? Health and happiness in every drop. You could tell that Kamm Schellinger was sipping on nothing but health and happiness in this picture, as they truly had built a successful business. And by 1900, they were pumping out 30,000 barrels of beer annually, at a time when the average brewery in America churned out about 18 to 20,000. Kamm Schellinger definitely had reason to give cheers to each other as they grew a once primitive brewery into a modern, thriving business. They became civic leaders in the Mishawaka community, and their reach extended well beyond the barley and the hops. For example, in 1898, they built the Kamm Schellinger building at 111 North Main Street. The Kamm building stood until urban renewal claimed the entire block in the mid-1970s. In 1918, one of Mishawaka's most prominent businessmen, a 40-year resident of Mishawaka, Nicholas Schellinger, passed away suddenly at the age of 70 in his Lincoln Way home, a home that still stands today as McCarthy Insurance. Schellinger sure missed out on what I'm sure was a fun time in the lives of anyone who had their living tied to alcohol, because the 18th Amendment, Prohibition, started in 1920 and lasted until 1933. But even around the same time as Schellinger's death, they were already starting to prepare for the doom ahead, as these 1918 ads already touted a Kamm Schellinger cereal beverage drink. And imagine eating some 1918 cereal with something that is simply advertised as cereal beverage made by a 1918 beer company. In the same year, after some experimentation, they touted that they perfected a new temperance drink called Arrow. And once Prohibition started, they offered a wider variety of non-alcoholic beverages, as noted in this root beer ad. At the bottom, it also displays the others that they offered: Arrow, Special, and Juleade. Prohibition lasted until 1933, and unfortunately, Adolph Kamm passed away in 1930 at the age of 88, never knowing that his beloved beer would once again be legal, and at the time of his death, the family retained interest in his business. Speaking of beer becoming legal again, the end of Prohibition meant that the old brewery off of Lincoln Way West could fire up again, and folks could once again taste Kamm's fine ale and beer. But after Prohibition, regional breweries like Kamm and Schellinger's never fully regained their pre-Prohibition success. When Prohibition ended, the government changed the rules on the distribution of alcohol. No longer could the breweries deliver to the local taverns directly, as Kamm and Schellinger started doing in the 1800s by horse-drawn trailer, and later in trucks like this. They had to now sell to a beer wholesaler, who then distributed the goods to the local watering holes. Along with the change in distribution rules, there were several tragedies at the brewery that had a major impact on the company. In 1930, two men working as steeplejacks fell 125 feet from an old chimney. Miraculously, this 18-year-old Albert Taylor had no signs of injury other than scratches and bruises, because he landed on a pile of coal. His partner, Alfred Likes, died instantly as he landed on concrete. Another major tragedy that hit the brewery. On February 1st, 1949, an explosion ripped through one of the brewery's buildings, killing 2 employees and badly burning another. And just look at the hole in that building. Goodness gracious. Then a little bit more than a year later, on June 20th, 1950, a 3-alarm fire that sent 3 firefighters to the hospital struck one of the brewery buildings, causing $100,000 in damages. That's $1.3 million today, so not a little fire. Soon after the last 2 tragedies, the Kamm family stopped all brewing operations in 1951, 100 years after it started as a small brewery on the banks of the mighty St. Joseph River, a company that grew right along with the city of Mishawaka. I mean, it started a mere 10 to 15 years after the city of Mishawaka was incorporated. Some point around the time the brewing stopped, it changed its name to Kamm Schellinger Warehouse Company. As the next 15 years or so, it rented out the old brewery buildings for storage, auto shops, and a plastic firm even set up shop there. And the city continued to deal with the old brewery complex, including multiple fires, varied worker injuries, chasing young ruffians around the complex, and looking for vandals with bleach burns. Obviously, the old brewery and 100 Center buildings are old now, but even in the late 1960s and early 70s, they needed a ton of work and they were in bad shape. Even then, some of the buildings were still over 100 years old, so just like today, the city had an uncertain situation going on with the future of the complex. And as I mentioned previously, the city frequently had to use their resources to extinguish fires and police the area for people trespassing and hanging around the crumbling buildings. And I think that sounds eerily familiar to the folks of Mishawaka today. And now, a brief word from one of our sponsors. I want to thank the Mishawaka Historical Museum for helping to support our content. And folks, I couldn't be more happier to help support them and to speak the good word about the museum. The Mishawaka Historical Museum is located at 121 South Main Street in Mishawaka, just south of the Lincoln Way and Main Street intersection. I highly recommend that our listeners visit, and I promise that you'll learn something new about our area's history. When you first walk in, you'll be impressed with how bright and clean the museum is. Then you'll realize that the burger and fries you just ate cost more than the entrance fee to the museum. Heck, the fries alone probably cost more than the entrance fee at this point. For $5, you'll experience what is, hands down, the most comprehensive collection of artifacts and historical background, all specific to Mishawaka. You will learn tons from the artifacts and corresponding information. You'll learn how important early industry was to Mishawaka, Kamm Schellinger Brewery, Ball Band, and Dodge Manufacturing, to name a few. You'll find out about famous Mishawakans, including professional baseball player Freddie Fitzsimmons, or Coach Marvin Wood, the coach depicted in the movie Hoosiers, who coached at Mishawaka High School as well. Speaking of Mishawaka schools, there's a whole section dedicated to the history of schooling in Mishawaka, including some real neat old uniforms, banners, and photographs. Speaking of photographs, the museum contains one-of-a-kind pictures depicting a variety of Mishawaka subjects, each with a caption explaining more about it. In the military heritage section, you'll learn about Mishawaka's role over the years in helping to keep our country free. In the historic landmarks section, you'll see some amazing pictures and artifacts from historical Mishawaka landmarks, some still standing and some that were sadly lost to time. There's a whole section dedicated to the importance of churches and religion to the city. And if you ever have any questions about any of the artifacts or information the museum contains, Pete DeKeever, the president and curator of the museum, is an absolute treasure trove of knowledge about Mishawaka, and he is right there to answer any questions you have or to provide more background to any of the museum's artifacts. Again, folks, I highly encourage you to visit the Mishawaka Historical Museum. You don't need to plan an all-day visit. 1 or 2 hours is all that you need to experience everything that I mentioned above. They're open Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m. Bring your $5 entrance fee, $3 for children 6 to 18, or free for 5 and younger, to experience a local gem of a place at 121 South Main Street, just south of the Lincoln Way and Main Street intersection. When you stop in, tell them that you heard about the museum on our podcast. Again, I'm very excited to be spreading the good word and encouraging you all to visit. To learn more, visit their website at www.mishawakamuseum.org. And now, back to our episode. But then on November 20th, 1968, it was announced that a group of 7 business and professional men formed the 100 Center Corporation. The local group planned on investing $7 million. Now that's a staggering $63.1 million today, into the old Kamm Schellinger Brewing Company to turn it into a, quote, whole environment conducive to the total interests of family, work, and play. By that time, the Thieves Market Antique Mall had already opened in the old carriage house, but the whole complex was in dire need of an overhaul, or it risked what is already happening today, continued demolition by neglect. Now, as many of you know, I love how urban landscapes evolve and change over the years. So I love looking at our historic plans for a variety of public and private projects over the years. But by now, I've learned that it's almost a given that everything that is originally announced, planned, and celebrated at the groundbreaking ceremonies rarely perfectly comes to fruition. Political and financial climates change, public needs change, and so on. So I love finding these original plans years later to see what the original vision was. Now, sometimes it's a good thing that plans never turn out as they originally intended. But I think, as you'll see in the case of the 100 Center, it was a blessing to the community that the heart and essence of its original vision were ultimately met, judging by how popular the 100 Center became. Now, I found the original plans of the 7 professional and businessmen who formed the 100 Center Corporation in the form of a book at the St. Joseph Public Library Local History Room. And a shout out to our library too. Absolute local gem in our community, and I cannot recommend it more. So over the next few minutes, I'd like to share the gist of this book with you. The new 100 Center would truly transform the old Kamm Schellinger Brewery into a place to live, work, shop, have fun, and much more. Here are a couple of sketches of the original 100 Center plans, and as you can see, it called for a variety of additional shop buildings and apartments throughout the complex. Kamm Island was even originally slated to have townhouses on the entire island. Here are some highlights of the shopping and dining aspects of the plan. As you can see, they already had plans to turn the old beer storage vault into a Rathskeller, which I found out is a German word for a below ground level tavern or restaurant. And matter of fact, the official name of the restaurant would become the Rathskeller and would become extremely popular in the coming years. And just look at how much action was planned for the old brewery building. A nightclub, shops, offices, a theater, restaurants, and even a hotel on the east side of the brewery. Just all types of action. The residential aspect of the plan touted studio apartments, garden apartments, and also the previously mentioned townhouses on Kamm's Island, even equipped with a swimming pool for the residents. I mentioned earlier that there were plans for a hotel just east of the brewery buildings, and not just any hotel, but a 100-room Holiday Inn, and it was planned to be an integral part of the development. It would have been equipped with a swimming pool and a convention center nearby. At the end of the plans, the 100 Center Corporation said that they wanted to take the character of the brewery and make it relevant to the needs of the day. The countless amounts of visitors over the years that frequented the 100 Center would agree that the development definitely kept the character of the historic brewery buildings. But it also provided a one-of-a-kind experience for patrons and those that live close by. With the vision established and the city of Mishawaka excited about the possibilities, ground was broken for the apartment complex and things looked up. But the 7 professional and businessmen who had the original vision and idea ran into some funding issues and did not see it all the way through, because in 1972, a well-known local developer, T. Brooks Bradamus, took over the project. And he must have hit the ground running, because right off the bat, he encountered several roadblocks, including having to go to court over a fencing issue with the next-door apartments, and also a legal dispute between his company and the original developers. But within a few years, Bradamus was sitting high on the hog, and the 100 Center was in full swing. As you can see in these pictures, the old brewery was alive with families and quite the array of unique shops. And just for the record, at the same time all of this action was going on at the 100 Center, Bradamus continued to tout the importance of bringing a hotel to the convention center there. But things changed, and so they pivoted, and they built a senior citizen high-rise apartment building instead. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, the 100 Center bustled with activity. Several additional buildings were added to the complex to add to the already eclectic bunch of shops that folks could enjoy. Families and couples could sit outside and soak up the nice Mishawaka weather while enjoying an ice cream cone or a stroll up and down the shops in the old brewery buildings. Or they can head to the old boiler house and take in a movie. And in 1977, one of the old houses on the property of the Kamm Schellinger Brewery, 706 Lincoln Way West, in the exact same house that Adolph Kamm himself built for his son Albin, was transformed into a legendary local restaurant, The Caravan. The Caravan didn't last long, as in 1978, a name that you can't be a resident of the area of and not know, the now legendary Hacienda Mexican restaurant started serving its chips and salsa, wet burritos, and livening up the atmosphere with their ice-cold, tasty margaritas. And actually, before it was transformed into a restaurant, the house held a few shops, including this wrap-away shop that had multiple advertisements in the Tribune in 1972. And folks, in only an hour and a half, and for only $100, just a mere $750 today, any man or woman could lose 5 inches or more, or they'd pay nothing. Yep, I'm not too concerned about that body wrap when I'm slamming on some Hacienda chips and salsa. We take a break here to share a special offer that'll help us keep cranking out the content. As you know, I love our local history and I love sharing about it. I've had a blast doing the podcasts, video, and other Round the Bend content. To support the continued creation of our content, we formed a partnership with In Rugco Studio and Gift Shop to create one-of-a-kind Storyland Zoo mugs. Storyland Zoo was a very popular children's zoo located in South Bend's Rum Village from 1957 until 1981. We recently created a video telling its story, and in response to the video, many of you have shared your own cherished memories of Storyland Zoo. With that nostalgia in mind, we are offering one-of-a-kind Storyland Zoo 15-ounce mugs for a limited time only. For just $18.99, you're helping to support us, as the proceeds will go towards future content. If you are interested in a Storyland Zoo mug, please click on the link in the show notes and complete the order form. You better act fast, though, because they are available on a first-come, first-served basis, and supplies are limited. If you have any questions, don't hesitate at all to reach out. Email roundthebend574@gmail.com. And if you haven't watched the Storyland Zoo video yet, be sure to check it out. The link is in the show notes as well. Again, through the 70s and 80s, the 100 Center was hopping. But by the 1990s, though, with folks flocking to the Grape Road area, most of the funky little unique shops had closed, and 100 Center mostly just offered dining options like Gianetto's Pizza, Fondue Parlor, and of course, Hacienda. But even in 1995, they were already trying to bring attention back to the 100 Center, like with this festival here. And then again, 7 years later, there's another article trying to bring attention back to the 100 Center. And I can't even think of all the different nightclubs that it's had since that time. Rum Runners, Truman's, Center Street Pub, Riverside Tavern, Smokestack Brew, to name a few. And if you're my age, that's right around the time you were in your early 20s. So you probably spent a lot of time hanging around the 100 Center, and most likely it wasn't for the historical value in the old buildings. And let's not forget about the comedy club The Funny Bone that came over to the old Boiler House when Scottsdale Mall closed. But still, in 2014, there is that revitalization word again, and business owners were still taking risks trying to build a successful business in the complex. Present-day 100 Center includes a few real nice spots still. Fanello's is a popular Italian restaurant in the building on the east side of the complex, and Jackson's Cigar and Spirits operates in the old stable building, and of course Hacienda is still going strong. But other than that, pretty much anyone who lays their eyes on the old brewery part of the complex can clearly see that it's deteriorating right in front of our eyes. In 2018, the owners said that they had secured financing to rehabilitate the brewery buildings, but then COVID hit and everything stopped. It went up for sale in 2021, and as of 2022, the last mention of it in the news or newspapers that I could find, it was still unsold. Ken Prince, Mishawaka city planner, said 100 Center has suffered for years because it was owned by an absentee landlord who let the building degrade over time. A 2022 article stated that the building owners have accrued more than $200,000 in fines for building code and fire safety violations, and they haven't appeared at a hearing in over a year. It was named one of Indiana's most endangered landmarks in 2019, and let me tell you folks, in 2024, it looks even more endangered. After I originally created this video, but before it was released, we heard news in late July of 2024 that a group of local developers presented plans to the city of Mishawaka to redevelop the 100 Center area into a multi-use complex. This would help save some of these legendary Mishawaka buildings, and it would connect all of the other wonderful river area development going on. We're cheering for you, because it will not be easy. Every article noted that the deal is complex and far from a certainty. So keep your fingers crossed and hope that they can pull it off. Now, anyone who is on the History and Memories of Michiana Facebook page, follows me on Twitter, or has watched any other of our videos, knows that I love checking out what remnants of our past are still visible in our area today. So you know I had to get out to the old Kamm Schellinger Brewing Company and investigate. So over the next few minutes, I'll share some footage of the old brewery in 100 Center today, some of which contains on-the-scene reporting by yours truly. We'll start with the iconic men themselves, Adolph Kamm and Nicholas Schellinger, who are both buried in Mishawaka's St. Joseph Catholic Cemetery. Their families are buried so close to each other that you could easily toss something underhand and hit the graves. First is Kamm's grave, and then you'll see how close Schellinger's is, right beyond the sidewalk there. And then you'll see a quick clip of Schellinger's family graves as well. Now check out this historic, beautiful home at 802 Lincoln Way West in Mishawaka. And now check out Lincoln Way there. It was dirt then. That's how historic this home is. Now check out this article from May 10th, 1972, soon after T. Brooks Bradamus took over the 100 Center project. A group called Southold Restorations protested Bradamus's development plans to demolish this house. He already demolished a house on the other side of Center Street a few weeks prior, a house that was the home of Adolph Kamm himself when he lived on the brewery property. The historic home that you just saw was Nicholas Schellinger's home on the brewery property, 802 Lincoln Way West, and Southold Restorations did not want Bradamus to take another step towards tearing that building. The article stated that the house at 706 Lincoln Way was safe. Now, this is 6 years before Hacienda took over that house, but the plans were to tear down the other two, one of which was sadly already tore down. Here is more on-the-scene reporting from the entrance to the old brewery where Schellinger's home still stands, the home in which he died in 1918. And of course, you'll recognize Hacienda, and that house was built by Adolf Kamm for his son Albin and given to him as a wedding gift. You have to imagine what old Kamm or Schellinger themselves would think today if they were standing on their porches looking at their old street, 2nd Street, aka Lincoln Way in Mishawaka. There's Nicholas Schellinger's house himself. I'm about certain he passed away in that home, currently McCarthy Insurance. Shout out for looking out, seeing some random weirdo recording. Hacienda, 1978. That house was here for much longer, though, and was built as a part of the brewery complex by the Kamm family. Another one of the Kamm's residents was right in this area to the right, to the east of Center Street. And shout out to McCarthy Insurance for currently taking care of that old treasure. Next, we travel down the bricks of Center Street, where years ago you'd be walking through the entrance to the old brewery with pastures containing cows and horses wandering around aimlessly. Just like us 20-something-year-olds did after closing time in the early 2000s on the same exact land. And speaking of those bricks, back in 1912, the newspaper celebrated the many miles of streets that were paved that year in Mishawaka, including Center Street paved in bricks, from 2nd Street, aka Lincoln Way, all the way to the brewery. And it even notes that the rest of the brewery complex got paved in bricks as well, a historic feature that we still see 110 plus years later. Here is more on-the-scene reporting from the old brewery property and current 100 Center. We start out in front and end up in the rear of the complex on Kamm Island. Some of the apartments as a part of the 100 Center residential shopping complex. The plans originally called for some sort of a Holiday Inn or a hotel. Not sure what happened. That fell through. But plans were made to build more permanent housing here. The Center shops, and currently Finello's Authentic Italian as a part of the 100 Center development. Shout out to Finello's, great people. The old brewery complex. The old boiler house, which housed that movie theater for a couple of decades. You could still see the boiler house letter imprint. I've watched several movies in that place in the 1990s as a young lad. A strapping young lad. Look at Old Stable Lane right there. Little old brick road. Because that is the horse stables. and currently one of the few businesses in here, Jackson Cigar Bar. Shout out. Please visit it. The Ice House, a very popular spot back in the day, from what I've read. More old brick. Behind the brewery and behind the old 100 Center in Kamms Island, there's the rear of the brewery, the north side of it. Oh, neat. You could see some sort of a brick structure. Foundation of the Kamm Island Apartments recently raised. Exposing the north side of some of the brewery buildings. And there's the north side of the stable, too. That building is much larger than I thought. And I'm wondering if that part there is the area that was blown out in that explosion. As we've learned over the last half hour, and as you've just seen, multiple generations of people, alive and dead, have each experienced different iterations of the property that sits at 100 North Center Street, the property whose roots are just as deep as the city it helped shape and grow. When John Wagner set up shop and built a brewery on the wooded banks of the mighty St. Joseph River in the 1850s, I'm sure that it took bold vision and involved many risks to build in a town that was only a decade or so old. When Adolph Kamm and Nicholas Schellinger partnered up in the early 1880s, it took bold vision to grow the brewery plant into what it became. When beer could no longer be brewed behind those old brick walls, a group of folks in the 1960s and early 70s had a very bold vision and took many risks to transform the old brewery into a one-of-a-kind shopping, residential, and entertainment center. But once again in the 2020s, as the brewery buildings are deteriorating before our eyes, we need the next John Wagner, the next Kamm and Schellinger, or the next 100 Center Corporation to share their bold vision to repurpose, rehabilitate, and literally save the historic brewery buildings so that another local history nerd in the 2050s can document the brewery's 200th birthday. Thank you again for spending your valuable time watching this video. I truly hope that regardless what age you are, regardless if you have cherished memories at the 100 Center or even the brewery, which would be amazing because if you turned 21 the day it closed, you'd be 94 years old today. Or if you simply like our local history like I do, I hope that you all learned a little something about a place that many people drive past every day and may not realize the sheer amount of local history it contains. Please join us again next time.